everyone, I'm Daniela Chuga. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm super excited about this collaboration I'm doing with two other fabulous bakers. It's a Toy Story 4 party, and we're going to show you everything you need to learn how to make a beautiful Toy Story 4 birthday party. So I'm making the cake, and my great friend Talia from Talia's Cake is making some adorable Toy Story 4 casicles. And my friends Laura and Arnie with Crazy Cool Cakes are making some fabulous Toy Story 4 cupcake toppers. Make sure you click on the links below to make sure you don't miss out on any of the other fabulous treats for your Toy Story 4 party. Let's get started.
So first of all, we're going to start off with making our fondant decorations. Because those need time to dry before we make our cake, they need to be nice and firm and standing up. So now what I'm doing here is I'm going to trace on a piece of wax paper over a Toy Story logo that I printed online, and I'm just using my fondant tool to inscribe it and get like the pattern of the design onto the wax paper. You want to make sure your tool is not too pointy because you don't want to rip clear through the wax paper. So here is some blue fondant, and I'm adding some CMC powder to that. And the CMC powder just helps it to dry faster and harder, and it works really well, especially if your fondant is soft. So here I'm using an X-Acto knife, and I'm just tracing around only the edge of the logo because that is the background of it. And so now what I'm doing is just adding my yellow layer of letters, and I flipped it over because it's just going to help get the impression a little bit better of the that's on the wax paper. And so I use my fondant tool to also help a little bit with that, but it's kind of hard to see here, but I could see it pretty good, and my sight's not that great either, so just to give you a guide of exactly where to cut, and so that you can get your letters exactly like the logo. And then so you're just going to place them on top of your first layer. And I'm looking at my logo. It's kind of off to the side. I can't fit everything on camera, but I'm just looking at it to make sure that it matches and it looks the same. On this part, I actually, instead of using the wax paper, I just traced right over the paper because it was just kind of hard for me to see at that point. And so yeah, I'm all done. So next I'm going to be making my cute little bunny rabbit. And I'm mixing in my CMC powder to make it nice and firm, and I'm making his little belly, and I made a little indentation for his head, and I like to roll out the feet in one piece. And what I did is I just rolled like a little sausage and then bent the ends up. And you can put toothpicks if you want extra support. However, I try not to because I know a lot of times little children, they eat the toppers. I do warn people, and you should too, if you use toothpicks in any parts of your toppers, because sometimes kids or people even will just pick them up and eat them. So now I'm just rolling out the head, and I'm going to use this tool just to get like a little stitching pattern down the center. And I'm using the ball tool to make his eyes, and I kind of just pushed up a little bit to make like a kind of like an eyebrow, and just putting in his eyes. Don't want him too bulgy, you want him just to be kind of flush with the face, and a little ball for the nose. And I just used my fondant tool to make an indentation so that I could add the mouth. So now for the eyes, I'm doing some purple glittery eyes, and I just used some disco dust for this. It's a violet, and I covered my little circles in that. And so I use a little bit of water to apply a lot of things, you know, if it doesn't just stick. Sometimes it will because the back of it is kind of tacky. But if it needs a little help, you can brush on a little bit of water to get it to stay. And to make the eyelids, I just used a circle cutter, and I overlapped it to make like a moon shape and added it on. And here I'm rolling out some black and adding it to the eyelid. He kind of has like a little bit of an eyelash on top of his lids. So now we're going to make his ears, and I roll out a little log of fondant, cut it in half, flatten them out. You can actually, for this part, if you're not a freehand type of person, you can probably use like a flower cutter to get those shapes. You just kind of have to rummage through and see which one works best. But I'm all about just freehanding it, because by the time I look for it and everything, it's usually takes about the same amount of time for me. Don't forget his little tail and his little chubby belly. And we are finished. And so next we have our little Ducky. Not sure what his name is. I call him Little Ducky. And I'm just rolling out 2 balls, and I have added some CMC powder to both of those to make sure that it's nice and firm. And so actually the bottom half is slightly smaller than the top half. His head's like really big, and I use a fondant tool to make an impression where his eyes will be. Just smoothing everything out, and I use my ball tool. His eyes are kind of wide set, they're like set far apart, so keep that in mind when making him. And filling it in with some white fondant, and his eyes are actually pink, like a hot pink. And I used a number 12, the back of a number 12 piping tip to cut out his eyes. And so I just rolled out some black fondant here, and I'm putting it around the eyes to give it some definition. And so after that I will be cutting out the eyelashes, and I'm not gonna lie, I did this like 5 times but I actually edited it out because, you know, obviously you don't want to see all my fails. So and you know, this video is like 30 minutes, and yeah, you don't want a 5-hour video. So the cake didn't take 30 minutes to make. It took probably about 6 or 7 hours. So here I'm making his little beak, and I just rolled out some orange fondant, and I kind of just bent the top part of his mouth, and it just gives it that cute little happy look. I really love how that turned out. Realized here his body was a little bit too big still, so I cut some off. And now I'm cutting the feet, and I'm just cutting his 3 little toes and kind of like rolling out the tops of them to make sure that it's like really smooth and not looking like really cut. Also cut off part of the face. I'm kind of a perfectionist. I realize his face isn't quite so long on the bottom, so sometimes I'll go back and fix things. Here are his little hands, or his wings, I guess. And so I'm just, you know, tapering off the ends, and I did add some toothpicks here to make sure that they can stand straight out, and just added them on. And so now last thing on him is going to be his hair. And so I just cut it, and I'm adding like 3 little pieces. It's not, you know, you could add more if you wanted to, a little bit more or a little bit less, but I think 3 looks good. So I added 3 little pieces of hair, and we're done with our little Ducky. Next we have our Forky. I was calling him Sporky for a while. His name is Forky, and I'm using fondant, and there is CMC in that as well. And I use an actual spoon, like a teaspoon, to measure out how big I wanted him to be. Cut off the top, and I'm cutting the little lines, the little what are those, peaks on the top of him. And then I added it onto the top of the spoon to make sure that it dries in a way that is actually shaped like a spoon. So here I'm using my little plunger cutter to make one eye. One of his eyes is bigger than the other, and so I use my plunger cutter to do that, and add that on, as well as the, I think it was the number 10 tip, piping tip, that I use for the other eye. I'm rolling out some blue for his mouth, and just fixing it up with my fondant tool and adding a little bit of water. I used the number 5 piping tip to get his eyes, and again, his eyes are different, his pupils, they're a different shape, and so I had to kind of like just press down on it to make it a little bit bigger. I've already added his eyebrow, and now I'm making his arms and wrap him around. Then I'm just going to place his fingers. He has 3 fingers. There's not really like a method that I had. It's kind of easy to do. It's kind of forgiving. Don't have to worry about it being absolutely perfect. His arms are kind of wild. So I set that aside to dry, and now I'm adding my CMC powder. I'm going to make a Ferris wheel, and so I'm adding plenty of CMC because I kind of want it standing up right off the cake. And I'm using some circle cutters, and I believe one was a 5-inch and the other one was a 4-inch, and this one was, I think, a 3-inch cutter. And you know, if you're going to make this, like, you can make it vary a little bit. It can be a little tiny bit bigger or smaller. Also, your sizes of cakes might be bigger or smaller, so it just depends on how big your cake is. So I'm just using edible markers to mark in the parts of the Ferris wheel that are colorful, and I used I didn't have a ruler, so I just used that cutter to kind of help me out to get a straight line. Just freehand cutting that. If you have a strip cutter, it's so much more helpful, but again, like, I didn't feel like looking for it, so like I just used, you know, I can do stuff like that, like not measure everything perfectly. Yeah, so I added that on and a little red center, and now I'm adding a blue line around the Ferris wheel just to give it lots of color and fun. And so I'm going to add some little lights onto our Ferris wheel, and I'm just mixing some yellow with some white food coloring. It's gel food coloring, and I'm using the back of my paintbrush to get some perfect little dots, and that is like the easiest way to do it rather than sitting there with the paintbrush trying to get perfect little circles. And so here I'm making like the base of the Ferris wheel. So I'm just going to do the same thing here. I'm going to add some little lights using the back of my paintbrush to make some little perfect circles. But yeah, you want to make sure this is dry before you handle it. But we are done with our little Ferris wheel.
So today I'm going to frost my cakes, and I like to keep my cakes chilled in the freezer just to make sure they're nice and firm, and I'm not having to worry about like tearing and breaking. And then obviously, like I already cut off the tops. I'm going to start with my first layer, and I'm not going to do filling in this one. I'm just going to fill it with some delicious vanilla buttercream.
So I printed out an image that I want on the front of my cake, the exact size that I want it to be, and I'm using a drafting table. You can actually use like your computer to help light it up if you need help with that. But I just use that because it's like a lot easier and I just happen to have it. But yeah, so here I'm adding lots of fondant. I'm adding lots of CMC powder to my fondant, and I'm placing the image that I traced penciled side down onto my fondant to transfer the image, and I'm just using my rolling pin to kind of like rub it on there. I don't want to rub it like back and forth. I just want to really make sure I get it like the impression of the pencil to make sure that I'm able to see it when I need it so that I can paint. And so using that as a guide, by the way, the pencil is non-toxic, and quite honestly, even if it's eaten, there's no way anyone's going to get poisoned by the tiny amount. Obviously it's non-toxic, so but no way anyone's going to get sick or bothered by the tiniest little amount that they might possibly eat, even if they ate the whole thing. So here I'm using my gel food coloring, and the thing that works really well with this is you want to add some clear vanilla extract so that you can kind of thin out your colors a little bit, or else it's going to be very like goopy. Also, another thing is you want to make sure that you mix your colors with white. Most of your colors need to be mixed with white food coloring, or else it's going to be very transparent unless you want it to be transparent. I will make a separate video to go more into detail about how to do this, but more or less I'm just following the lines of the that I've made with the pencil, and kind of doing a little bit of shading. I'm not an expert painter by any means, but I was happy with how this turned out. It wasn't that difficult, and so yeah, I can, if you're really interested in me making a painting on fondant video, post a comment below and I will make that my priority next video to make. So yeah, I'm just layering the colors. I always start off with the skin colors first. I think I forgot his hand on the bottom and I have to go back and do that, but I try to just do like the skin tones first, and then I'll go on to the white. I don't want to do the white last because if you scrape it against like a darker color, you're gonna have a hard time if it gets like smeared. So I start off with like the lighter colors first, and then followed by my black, and then I make sure that I fill in all the other colors very gently, and add like patterns and whatnot obviously last. So just taking my X-Acto knife and cutting around my image, and again, like I said, I added lots of CMC to this because I kind of want it like standing up on the cake. And so once I have that and it's dry, I don't want to touch it when it's wet, I add a little bit of fondant glue here and just added it to my cake. Set that aside, and now I'm just going to cover my board in fondant. Just to talk a little bit about this, it's just something I like to do. I feel like it gives my cakes a much more finished look. So yeah, I'll just, roll it out the same size as the board. You want to wet the board a little bit, not a lot, or else it's going to get like bubbly. Just give it a very light dampening with like a washcloth or a paper towel, and then cut off the extra edges. And then I'm gluing a ribbon around the bottom of the board. And that, just like I said, it gives it a nice finished look as opposed to just putting it on a black or white board.
It's time to stack the cake. I have my little toppers and my beautiful hand-painted Woody, Bud, and Bo Peep. I'm going to take a spatula. I actually glued the cake board down to this board just to help me with frosting and everything. So now I'm going to go ahead and lift that up from the back very gently. And I'm going to get some glue and I'm going to glue it onto this board. So now a little dollop of glue. And I'm going to lift this. Cake is really chilled, so it's cold, but it does have some condensation, so I'm going to go and lift it from the bottom. And it looks like this is coming off, isn't it? So I'm going to go ahead and just push down these sides again. I've actually had this like sitting out for a minute because I wanted to make sure it was defrosted enough to stick the dowels through. So I'm going to grab my dowels. So I'm going to place my 5-inch pan on top of my cake, and I'm going to use my fondant tool and just make a mark all the way around. Make sure that I place my dowels in the correct spot.
So I'm just going to cut my dowels, and I've measured these dowels into my cake. I stuck one in and then cut it down to the correct size. You want to make sure that it's completely flush with the top of the fondant, and you want to make sure that you push it through all the way. Using that as a guide, I cut my other dowels, and there are 6 that I've pre-measured, and I'm just going to stick them in. And usually you can add a little bit of frosting, like a little bit of buttercream or ganache to the tops of these. I didn't here because my fondant was really sticky, and I was certain that the top layer would stick to the bottom layer of the cake without having to do that. So yeah, just stick them in, and we are moving on.
So now we're going to get our smaller tier. We're going to place it on top. And I do this in the freezer for a few minutes just to make sure that it's nice and firm, so I'm not like messing it up when I'm touching it. Okay, so now we're going to start adding our other decorative elements. So I have this fondant glue, and it actually works really well. To be honest, like I got it at a cake show and it was free, and I was like, it's probably not going to work too good. It's probably just CMC mixed with water. But it actually works really good. And then if I can find it online, I'll post the link for this because I really do like how it works. I mean, it really glues it on there. So I have that here. So this is made by Fondex. Like I said, I'll search for it. I'm not sure that they sell it like on Amazon. That's like my go-to site because I can get everything like really fast. Usually it's like something I need fast. So I I really wanted this to be like standing up off the cake like this. Just to give it like a fun feel. I'm just gonna hold this for a few minutes. So I have this little guy drying on the spoon. I'm gonna go ahead and insert a couple of toothpicks. Now you wanna make sure, like if you're selling this or if this is for family, that you always let them know, like don't take for granted that people know there's toothpicks and stuff, because kids and people, like they might just bite into it. So please, please, please make sure you tell people. I can't stress it enough. It really is always just something that always concerns me. And I know sometimes I'm just like overkill on stuff, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. And so I'm gonna set this to the side really quick. And I'm gonna cut a little, what will this be? A little X right here. Because I'm gonna make him popping out of the cake. He's kind of a wild little guy. I'm just gonna pull this out. I actually want it to look like he is like busting out of the cake. Big enough. We gotta be very careful with this guy because he's like super fragile. Isn't he cute? I love his cute little face. I anticipated that that could happen, but don't worry, we will fix it. So I'm gonna go ahead and stick him in. Place it behind here and kind of stick it to the cake. So I'm just sticking him on the cake, like directly onto the cake, and I put his broken arm like right behind him, so you can't really tell that it was broken. We're gonna add our Toy Story logo on top. Bunny guy, he's so cute. And like if you're gonna carry this out, like you probably want to put like a toothpick or something underneath him just to make sure he would adhere to the board. And so I scooted this Toy Story logo back a little bit because I almost forgot my cute little Ducky that we made. And I'm gonna say it looks good. And there we have it, our Toy Story 4 cake. And I hope that you enjoy this video. If you do, give it a thumbs up, a subscribe, and a like. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to click on the links below to watch the rest of this collaboration for your fabulous